went over to talk to him, and he had felt kind of sorry for me, so he started talking to me. And it's a sort of, that kind of empathy is sort of a good basis for a lifetime friendship, I think. So we started out being protective of each other, and then, of course, enjoyed each other's company very much. We were both very interested in art, even at that tender age, and that also was a bond. We both did a lot of drawing and took whatever art classes there were there. And I was just trying to think of a few things. You know, I knew Don for 74 years or something, so I'm picking out sort of things. But when we were kids in that grade school, one of the things we did was work out a secret code so we could write letters to each other. And we got so good at the code that we could memorize it. We didn't have to look at the cheat sheet. But I was talking to Roz the other night about telling her about this, and then I started wondering if I could put it, you know, remember it and put it back together. So I did. So this is it, and you can look at it if you want. One of the things about it is that it's visual. It's all based on a square, and then a square for A, and B is the square with one side missing, and C is the square this way, and so on. And then when you get, then you put a dot in the middle of some, and so on. So I'm exposing this to the public for the first time. And if any of you run across any of our old letters, you could probably decode it. So anyway, to proceed, we went from there to Roosevelt High School in Seattle and remained very close. As a matter of fact, people thought we were brothers. We looked alike, and both blonde Nordic kids. And I was remembering one time when I was on the track team, and I was about to, on the start line, and about to go, and from the stands I heard, "Come on, Normark!" Okay, running for Don. And the other thing, one of the things we did in high school was archery. We both got, we did this on our own, not with classes or anything. We got bows and arrows and got very good at it. We did spend a lot of time shooting at targets. And I want you to notice there's an archery picture in the other room, which is not from our activity, but it's from, I mean, if you think that Don had a lot of experience as a kid with archery, it sort of adds something. Don was always looking at things from a kind of empathetic view. I think this is one of the strongest things about his photographs. And then he had quite a varied experience in life, which he brought to photography. And that's one of the things that makes him so rich, I think. He was in the Marine Corps. He joined in order to get the GI Bill, mostly. It was right after the Second World War. We graduated in '46. And so he was stationed in Southern California for 2 years and would travel back and forth to Seattle. One of the incidents that I remember just telling about was that he had a weekend leave one time, and he was about to hitch a ride on a plane, a cargo plane going back to Seattle. And his leave was canceled at the last minute because he had to fill in for someone else. So he was really pissed off and angry about it. And it turns out that that plane flew into Mount Rainier. Everybody was killed. So I'll be at Ben and having a good week here. He went to the Art Center School in Los Angeles, and which was a kind of commercial art, a lot of emphasis on commercial stuff. You know, how to photograph glass and metal and so on for commercials. And he was kind of disappointed in that, although I think you can see it in that kind of background in the way he photographed materials. I think he had a great sensitivity for that. But while he was at that school, he began wandering around Los Angeles, and he came upon a Mexican-American community. He was just looking for a view of Los Angeles, but this was in the hills, in Chavez Ravine, it was called. And he began photographing people there. He was really very interested in documentary photography, just on his own. I mean, it wasn't through the school particularly. And that became a months-long project where he got to know the people. He went back over and over and got the photographs. None of those photographs are in this particular exhibition, though they are in this. A few of them are in the catalog that's available. And those were such remarkable photographs. The series that Dorothea Lange, the great documentary photographer, saw them and would talk to Don about them, was very impressed that they should be published and so on. And also Minor White, on the basis of seeing those photographs, he invited Don to go to a week-long workshop that he was giving in Carmel. And Don didn't have any money. He was just out of the Marine Corps. And Minor said, you can sleep on Edward Weston's lawn if you've got a sleeping bag, which he did. And Weston Don had a great way with people anyway. So Weston invited him in for breakfast every morning. And so for a week he had breakfast and was able to talk to Edward Weston about his photography. Minor White, Minor became a great friend of Don, and vice versa. And Don studied in Minor's workshops a number of summers later on. One time Don was going to an exhibition, a retrospective exhibition of Minor's, a big one in California, and he walked in the door, and the first thing he saw was a great big blow-up of one of Minor White's photographs, and it was of Don's feet. And I Xeroxed it. I mean, I looked it up on the web and Xeroxed it. You can look at this if you like. This isn't, of course, a very good reproduction of it. But these are Don's feet, and in fact, it's called Feet of Don Normark. So let's see, what else should we talk about here? He did freelance work for a number of years. It wasn't until about 10 years after that he really began to make a living at photography, when he joined Sunset magazine, and and from that point on, for another 30 years, he was one of the main photographers for Sunset, and had almost every issue for 30 years had one or more of Don's photographs in it. He was very much in demand from writers who would, the Sunset's method was to get a writer and a photographer together, and then they go on an assignment. And Don, a lot of the writers liked to have Don along because he had such a good eye. It's not, I think it's very difficult in many ways to photograph vegetation. You know, he all wants to get into mush and stuff. But Don was very good at it, and his eye could separate leaves from other things, and whatever it takes to do good good landscape photography. In fact, later on when the Huntington Gardens did a great big book of their collection of their gardens, they bypassed their in-house photographers and had Don do them all. So that's a big, beautiful book if you run across it sometime. We lived together in New York from 1950 to 1952. We're rooming together in an elegant cold water flat down on the Lower East Side that we paid $40 a month for, and it had only one spigot and no hot water, literally, and no bathtub, and had a john down the hall. But you know, it was home. So we got some jobs together. One was working in a slaughterhouse on Manhattan Island. They had only kosher slaughterhouses because the meat had to be in the market within 3 days or something. And this was a kosher slaughterhouse, and there's a slaughterhouse photograph here that is not from that time, but again, it's Don's experience that invests itself in a photograph like that. The slaughterhouse wouldn't allow photographers in because they had bad publicity. Of course, I don't know any publicity about a slaughterhouse that would be bad. But we both worked there for a month or 2 months or something, and then it was a peculiar time. It was the 1950s, and McCarthyism was in the air. And Don was attending writing workshops at New School for Social Research in New York, which was a very good school. They got all kinds of wonderful writers and artists and everyone to teach there. But the guy that did the hiring at the slaughterhouse he started looking at the resume and saw that Don was at the New School. And so we were both fired because, you know, he thought we were communists. Well, that was those days. You had no comeback to it at all. And what else should I say here?
There's a trip with Jane Goodall, remember that?
Oh, yeah. Well, let me talk about New York a little more. And let me get a little more water. Speak up.
There's a guy who organized the big demonstration. Remember?
We met a lot of people in New York. Oh, I can tell you right. The photograph above is a woman that lived in our apartment house, and she was just a friend. She was nursing her 1-year-old, and her 3-year-old was had picked up one of her. I think we had invited her to dinner, and she had picked up an art book and was showing her the Mona Lisa, and she said, "Look, Mommy, that's you." So sweet. And that's a lovely photograph, I think. Below it is Byron Rustin at our house. We had met him through our interest in pacifism. And the Fellowship of Reconciliation.
Is there beer in that glass?
And he came to our place for our famous lentil soup dinner, which we served people. It was really very good. But and we went on 2 or 3 peace marches with him. It was a good time. Byron Rustin is the one who, for one thing, he talked Martin Luther King into a pacifist idea. Byron was Quaker and had been organizing in the South 10 years before Rosa Parks, and even preceding Martin Luther King. But he was a friend of King's, and he had a very good reputation as an organizer. And there's a very good book on Fire too. But and he's also the one that organized the March on Washington that King spoke at. So that was a great privilege to know him. This is by the way, this is a steer hanging by its hind legs and leading this way, which is typical of what was going on in the slaughterhouse. They somehow knew that the drawing wouldn't be as wouldn't be as incriminating as photographs, so I was allowed to go to the slaughter floor and make drawings, and that was okay. And I got a number of good paintings from that. The one to the right of that is a crowd of people who are MacArthur was insubordinate to Truman. Some of you remember those times. Wanted to extend the war to China and so on, and Truman fired him finally. But there was a big uproar among the Republicans in the right wing as to who were, it was at a point where it could almost have been a revolution. Certain forces had taken place because MacArthur was very powerful and very popular. And if he had taken the army with him or whatever, you think at certain points in history it could be very edgy. And anyway, this MacArthur had a parade throughout Fifth Avenue after he was fired, and Don went down to make photographs. This is one of quite a number that he did. And his interest was in the crowd. He didn't do one photograph of MacArthur or that part of it. He was looking at the crowd, and he was wanting to express, or letting them express what he saw, which was this kind of rabid fringe, as he thought about it, who were cheering MacArthur. Anyway, it's a very expressive picture and very indicative of the kind of approach I think that Don had lots of times of being focused on people and with a great empathy toward people rather than monuments of some sort. Someone was mentioning, I think Ross was mentioning the other day, that there are no pictures in here or in his files of the Empire State Building and various kind of tourist spots. He was always doing something else that had to do with the way people. Just a couple more things maybe I'll mention. The photographs here on this wall are there's one of myself when I was making a sculptural portrait of Don. And we were doing that in my parents' basement. We had an area where I could, this is clay, and I was having him pose with his head way back, because I thought it was fantasy. He was really torturous posing, but he was good enough to pose for quite a while, over and over again. And, I think it's a great photograph. And the one next to it is a clam digger, and both of those were very early photographs. In fact, those two were in his portfolio that he sent to the Art Center School in Los Angeles to get admission to the school. And they're so accomplished. I was going to the Museum Art School just about the same time that he was doing this. And I was always so impressed that he seemed to have everything intuitively that I was working at you know, over and over in